What's up, scholars? Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be discussing post-war, the heartbreaking sequel that I absolutely did not need after Marineford. As if I wasn't already hurt enough by the events of Marineford, post-war made me hurt more than Marineford in a very different way. I hurt a lot because we get so much characterization in this arc, not only for Luffy, but for Ace as well. And the characterization we get on Ace just, it explains so much of who he is. It deepens the relationship that him and Luffy had as brothers, because I don't know if it was the same for the rest of y'all, but at least for me, in Marineford, we've known Ace a little bit. Like we've only seen him a little bit. We know how important of a character he is to Luffy because of how much emphasis Luffy puts on him and the connection they have, but we only really get to see snippets of their brotherly bond, of their relationship. Like back in Alabasta, we get this first glimpse of how much they mean to each other, their brotherly bond, how they interact. And then we kind of get a little bit more sprinkled out throughout the rest of the series. And in Impel Down and Marineford, it kind of gets a little fleshed out to the point where Ace's death hurts, both because of him as a character being taken away, and then of course him and his connection to Luffy. But what hurt me more what hurt me more was just the deep bond that these two share as brothers, just being totally explored. Like we know, oh, Ace and Luffy are brothers. They're brothers, and yeah, they kind of grew up together, all of that. But because at that point before Marineford, we didn't get to see any of that, the impact of it was only from what we'd experienced thus far. We didn't know anything about them growing up. We didn't know anything about how they met, their bond, any of that. And it just really hits you hard just how much these two relied on each other, just how much they loved one another, what they meant to one another. Because it wasn't just Luffy who had this high regard and love for Ace. Obviously, Ace loved Luffy just as much, if not more, as his role of being a big brother to Luffy. And that hurt me so much more than Marineford did. And post-war is an arc that I took in by myself, reading and watching it. I did that alone. I made no videos over post-war, neither on YouTube or TikTok. I took my time to kind of consume this all by myself, because after Marineford, I needed that little reprieve of being able to just take it all in alone and cry alone and suffer alone. I needed that after Marineford. And post-war was worse, so, you know, it is what it is. But I'm glad I took it in by myself because of all the emotions that post-war brought out. There's so many very heavy topics touched on in post-war that I just kind of had to work through. And it hit me more than I was thinking. Like, I was already trying to prepare myself for what would happen when Luffy woke up. That's what I was trying to prepare myself the most for. And what I thought was going to happen was delivered, and then so much more on top of that. And it just destroyed me. I thought I was hurt enough in Marineford, and post-war really came in and said, you thought. If Marineford was like the sucker punch of the series, post-war was the fatal blow. In my opinion, that's how it was for me. I don't know what it was like for y'all's experience, but for me, that's what just really ruined me, was post-war. And going into these arcs, I really need to stop saying what's gonna hurt me about this arc, and what hurts me about this is I really need to start going into these arcs saying, okay, what is not gonna hurt me? Because a lot of things hurt me. I get hurt a lot by the show. Y'all know this very well by now. I should know this very well by now. I need to stop thinking about what's going to hurt me and try to think of what's not gonna hurt me and see where I go from there, because I just keep getting hurt and I'm not really appreciating it right now, Oda. It's rough. It's rough. But this arc really explores a lot of the aftermath of Marineford, what's happening to the world in general, both in the Marines, the pirates, world government. All that situation is really getting explored. And then, of course, you have Luffy. Luffy's reaction to everything. You have a lot of characterization, not just with Luffy and JIMBEI, but also with the flashback that we get, and then with the crew's reaction. It is a very heavy arc. It is a shorter arc, but it feels so heavy and so dense that there's so much to talk about. So let's go ahead and talk about it, because if I sit here and think about it anymore, I'm just gonna start crying. So let's go ahead and talk about it and dive right into my review of post-war. So post-war begins with the news spreading around the world about Whitebeard's death. Now there's very mixed feelings and mixed reactions to this. You have a lot of like random citizens and regular people, including, and then the Marines on top of that. They're all celebrating. They're celebrating the death of Whitebeard. They think that it's going to bring peace to all the common people, and the Marines are celebrating because they have finally felled the mighty Whitebeard, and that means the Marines, the Navy, cannot fall. They will always be victorious. They reign supreme in this era, and they're so happy about that. And on the flip side, you have pirates who, some see this and recognize that this is the end of the era. This is the end of the age, and something new is beginning. A lot of them have marked Blackbeard as a target, as this person that is now trying to start a new era. They're not sure how that's gonna go. Bonnie has an interesting reaction. She gets very angry and says it's all your fault before she takes off for the new world. At first, I was thinking she meant it was Blackbeard's fault, but I think she might be talking about someone else, and I'll get to that later on in her moment later in the arc with Blackbeard and Akainu. I'll get to that. But I don't think she was talking about Blackbeard. And she takes off. So a lot of the pirates, they are angry, they're sad, they're curious to see what this new age is going to look at. But a lot of pirates have been reinvigorated with this desire to go after the One Piece because of Whitebeard's speech. His speech has just set all of their hearts ablaze, pun intended, to go out into the new world, to chase after the One Piece, to keep the age of piracy going. Across the board, whether people have a positive reaction or a negative reaction to Whitebeard's death, it is very clear that a new age has started. Something new is beginning in the world. Whitebeard's death marked the end of an era, marked the end of an age, and now it is just completely unknown what is going to happen now. And there is just chaos. Now that Whitebeard is gone, he's dead, places that were safe because of him are now getting raided, and there is just chaos everywhere because there are some pirates who are taking this reinvigorated desire to chase the One Piece and starting to pillage towns. They're raiding, they're slaughtering and killing everybody around them because, hey, the pirate age is not over. We're going after the One Piece. And the peace that the Marines thought that was going to happen when Whitebeard died is nowhere to be found. It completely backfired on them, and there is chaos everywhere. This new age is starting off very chaotic. But while that's all happening in the world, we get a glimpse at Luffy's condition, and when Boa gets on the ship, she asks how he's doing. Law says that he survived the surgery, but it's up to him because he suffered a lot of damage both physically and mentally. So his fate is kind of up in the air at that point. Jinbei comes out, he's awake, he thanks Law for saving him, but also acknowledges that he can't sit still because of the turmoil his heart is in. And I just, if there is an MVP for this arc, in general, it is Jinbei. If Jinbei doesn't become part of the crew when we go to Fishman Island, I am going to riot. I am going to riot because, I mean, Jinbei is the sole reason Luffy is alive right now, and I will get to that in a little bit. But my golly, Jinbei is the MVP of this arc. I love him so much. But yes, Jinbei's awake. They're talking about what they're needing to do because they're out in open waters. It's not safe. Boa offers to take them to Amazon Lily, and Eva's there kind of discussing Luffy's condition as well. Like, he was already in bad shape and Impel Down, and then he still went to Marineford, so of course he's going to be struggling at this point. And Eva makes a really good point. He says that Luffy shut down as a defense mechanism. Like, at that point, it wasn't just like his bodily injuries that made him shut down. It was the mental tax of seeing Ace die that also caused him to shut down. So everyone is really concerned what's gonna happen when Luffy wakes up. But they decide, Boa, the little bits of levity were great. Boa being very abrupt to Beppo was so funny, and how he just kind of like bashfully apologizes every time she says something to him. It's really cute. It's really funny. But Boa ends up offering to take them to Amazon Lily. So I believe Eva and his group, they set off to go back to his kingdom. I cannot pronounce that. But they set off to go back, and Boa and Law, they go to Amazon Lily. But as they're traveling, we get the information of what happened in Impel Down when Sengoku gets the report that, first of all, the poison guy, Magellan, I was coming to it, it was coming to me. Magellan got beaten within like an inch of his life. Which, okay, how he seemed so ridiculously powerful. And I thought we saw all of like the big prisoners in Impel Down when we were there, but maybe not. And Blackbeard just caused a whole riot Hunger Games situation of his own. It was like, hey, fight to the death, whoever's the strongest gets to come with me. Crazy. And what does the world government want to do? They want to cover it up. They want to hush it all up, which is very much in their character to do something like that. Because, oh, if the world figures out that Impel Down is no longer safe and all of these inmates escaped, it's gonna look bad on us. So they're not gonna warn the world about all of these heinous criminals that are now on the loose just to save face. And Sengoku got so angry. And you know what? I like Sengoku as a character. I liked him in Marineford. He's a man dedicated to doing his job, and he's trying to do his job to the best of his ability, which is why I find his decision later in this arc quite interesting. But I like him as a character, and the fact that he gets so mad that the world government is trying to cover this up really kind of intrigues me. But we also have Doflamingo just destroying Moria, trying to kill Moria. Moria's like, why are you doing this? Like, did Sengoku put this on you? And Doflamingo says something very interesting. He says, no, this order came from someone far higher up, aka the world government. Which I'm thinking the 5 elders had to be the ones to put that order down. Because they very much knew later in their conversation that they had to fill the spot for Moria. It's so messy, it's so convoluted and just so corrupt. And Doflamingo, I talked about him in Marineford. I cannot figure out what his goal is. One of y'all commented on which video? I think it was the Willow D video that I did about Doflamingo's character, because I talked about him there too. That he made an interesting statement in Sabody about the era he's kind of concocting, and it's the era of the smile, which is quite fascinating because he finds amusement in literally everything he does. He just likes to laugh about it. So it's very interesting, and I want to learn more about Doflamingo because he's a very intriguing villain. He's a very intriguing antagonist, and I can't quite figure out his motivations yet. I've kind of pinned a little bit more about his character now, but I can't quite pin down his motivations. But he's willingly associating with the world government because it benefits him. But then we get back to Luffy, and Luffy wakes up and just starts rampaging. The first thing he says when he wakes up is he screams out, "Where is Ace? Ace, where are you?" And no, he's not listening to anybody. Law's crew is trying to stop him and they can't. And he's just going full out ballistic, hurting himself. And JIMBEI asks Law, like, what's gonna happen if we can't stop him? And Law says his wounds will reopen and he's gonna die. And the way Luffy is just rampaging at this moment could kill him. He could very well kill himself this way. Before I get into that, because that's going to be a very heavy topic to talk about because of what he said in Marineford. Before that, we get Boa getting the news that Luffy's awake, but she herself hasn't been eating all this time because she's been so worried about Luffy, so she's being forced to stay there and eat before she can go to Luffy and bring him food. And we get Luffy destroying the forest around him, bashing his head against rocks, against trees, the ground, everything around him. Anytime he gets even the slightest memory of what happens, the PTSD is so overwhelming and so powerful in his mind that he cannot stand it. At the moment, he cannot live with it. He cannot live with these images flashing in his head, and he's doing everything he can to convince himself it's a dream, to convince himself that it never happened, even though he fully knows it did. And when the reality comes crashing down on him as JIMBEI finds him, and Luffy says, don't say anything, like, shh, don't say a word, I know. Like, don't say it out loud. I know it's real. I know I'm not dreaming. He's tried to tear his own cheek off, pinching himself so hard to try to wake himself up. He knows he's not dreaming. He knows Ace is dead. And JIMBEI comes to Luffy fully prepared, knowing what he has to do. He has to fill this role at the moment to calm Luffy down, but also be there in a way for Luffy that that in a way Jinbei has to suppress himself and his grief and what he's feeling, because he is still grieving the loss of Whitebeard and Ace. He knew both of them very well. But he sets that aside. He sets his own grief and suffering aside to focus on saving Luffy. Not just helping him. He had to save Luffy at that moment, because Luffy wasn't only in just physical trouble of, oh, his wounds could reopen and die. Like that was a very pressing matter, but he needed to save Luffy mentally at that moment. But before we get into that, we get put into this flashback that just shatters. It shatters me, because as great and heartwarming as a lot of this flashback was, you know, it's all fun to see our boys together, growing up, getting to know each other, the chase between Ace and Luffy, how goofy they were, how kid-like and childlike they were as children, while also being very mature for their age. All of that is very, heartwarming and fun, but also just, it's not at the same time, because there's just this underlying tone of sadness knowing all of this is gone. All of this, that childlike memory, that fondness between these two brothers is gone, because Ace is gone. So seeing these flashbacks for the first time was like a cruel and unusual punishment Oda puts on his readers to show how devastating the grief is that Luffy is feeling, to show how much this is just destroying him. Because yes, we knew before that they were brothers, that they are connected to each other, and that they loved and cared for one another. We knew it, and now we get shown it. And knowing what was to going to what is reality just hurts a lot. But it's so brilliantly done with the storytelling, and it just really showcases these characters and lets us understand these characters so much more than what we did before. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful and sad and soul crushing, and it's great. It's great, but it sucks at the same time. From an author's perspective, this is brilliant, beautiful storytelling and character work. But from a reader's perspective, while it's like, wow, this is an amazing story, you're like, this sucks. This hurts so much. But yes, we get to this flashback. We get Garp bringing Luffy to Dadan and their introduction, Garp's history with Dadan of how he brought Ace to her to help raise Ace, and now he's bringing Luffy. We get the first interaction between Ace and Luffy. Ace spits on Luffy because he doesn't want this little brat around, and Luffy at first tries to harbor resentment towards him, but then he remembers Shanks and quickly forgets about that. And I find it very funny that when Dadan is first initiating Luffy into the whole bandit crew, Luffy's just so unfazed by everything. She's like, oh, well, you're gonna have to work hard, you're gonna have to do this, you're only gonna get a cup of rice and 1 glass of water all day, that's all you get. And Luffy's just like, okay, I survived in a jungle once, so this should be a piece of cake. She is so baffled by it. Luffy's so unfazed. And then Luffy just starts chasing after Ace. We see him go after Ace so many different times. Ace always tries to take Luffy out, keep him from following him. He's knocked down trees, he's kicked him off of bridges, he's done all these things to deter Luffy, and Luffy just doesn't give up. he doesn't give up. And he keeps chasing after Ace to try to win Ace's approval, to try to befriend Ace. We see him do this for like weeks, maybe months, trying to get on Ace's good side, until Luffy finally is able to follow Ace to the Great Terminal where Ace is with Sabo. We get introduced to Sabo, who was name dropped at the end of Marineford, and now we get to meet him. He is this other brother, pretty much, in this trio, who also lives in Great Terminal, but was a runaway. And Ace and Sabo are already like best of friends. They are the best of friends, planning together to run away to become pirates. They're saving up money. And of course, Luffy overhears them, and he's like, oh, y'all want to be pirates? Me too, let me join you. Automatically tied up, and Luffy's like, my name's Luffy, what's your name? And Sabo and Ace's reaction to Luffy is so funny, because they're like, he knows, so now we have to get rid of him. And Luffy's like, I don't want to die, I just wanted to say hi to y'all. It's so funny, and they're so brutal to him at first. But then Luffy crying because he doesn't want to get killed, which, you know, is fair. This is a side tangent, but Luffy being such a crybaby when he was younger, like crying over a lot of things, adds a lot of depth and characterization to him, because, and it makes a lot of sense seeing how he is now compared to how he was then. Seeing him not want to cry a lot, and we don't see Luffy cry a lot now. Knowing that he cried a lot when he was younger as a little kid, when like he was 7 years old, he was a crybaby, just adds so much to his character, and I really, really love that. I really, really love Luffy, which makes this hurt a lot more. But Luffy ends up getting captured by these pirates, because instead of hiding with Ace and Sabo, he just walks out to them, screams out Ace's name, and Ace is like, why would he say my name? And I love this panel when that pirate was asking like, oh, well, you know Ace, where is he? And Luffy's trying to lie, but he's such a horrible liar, and he's just like, I don't know. It's so funny. And then Luffy gets taken. Luffy gets captured. He's taken away to be tortured by these pirates so that he will give up Ace. He gets brutally beaten because they figure out he's a devil fruit user. They can't hurt him by normal means, so he gets beaten by spiked gloves. A grown adult beating a 7-year-old child. And, you know, Ace and Sabo at first, they're so worried. They're like, oh, he's gonna give us up. We gotta move all of our treasures somewhere else. But by the time they do that, Sabo comes back and be like, they're not coming, because Luffy never sold us out. He still hasn't said anything. And Ace at that moment is so shocked to realize that they go after Luffy. They bust in to save Luffy after Luffy's been beaten bloody and like he's nearly unconscious, but he still refuses to give Ace and Sabo away. He will not say anything about them. And they come to save him. And we get the first snippet of Ace's bad habit, which is that he stands his ground and he doesn't run away from a fight. And then we have this conversation between Ace and Luffy where Ace is yelling at Luffy for, you know, not giving him up, because he's like, why did you endure all that torture? You should have just told them. Why didn't you tell them? And then Luffy says, because I have nobody else. He's all alone. He's got nobody else but Ace. And then he drops this line. He says he'll be all alone if he can't be with Ace. Getting hurt like that is better than being alone. He would rather be tortured than end up by himself. The fact that Luffy was like, I felt like I couldn't be friends with you. I wouldn't be able to be with you if I said anything. So I didn't, because being alone is worse than being hurt. And when you think about that, and then you think about what happened on Sabo when Luffy does end up alone and he ends up without his crew, and then how he was acting on Amazon Lily, and then going through Impel Down, gathering people around him, to Marineford, to losing his brother and being alone, and now he feels alone because he's lost Ace, knowing that one of Luffy's biggest fears, in a sense, is loneliness. That puts so much of his character into perspective. From the first moment we met Luffy, when he met Kobe and then Zoro, and then the way he started gathering his crew around him, to the point where he was so loved by those around him that he was never alone. He was always with somebody. The way he wanted people to be with him, that the way he wouldn't take no for an answer for people not wanting to be around him, to be on his crew, to the way he fought so desperately to keep people from leaving him. It puts so much of his character into perspective, knowing that one of his biggest fears is loneliness, is being alone. He would rather physically be hurt and tortured and beat himself up, declare war on the government. He would rather face so many enemies that he can't defeat to hurt himself. He would rather go through all of that, risk dying, rather than being by himself. When I first heard that, because I watched this in the anime, I will say I love the way the anime handled the flashback of this arc. They handled it so well. They handled a lot of this arc very well. When Luffy said that, and I first heard it, something just broke inside my heart and I cried. Like, I had tears just like creeping down my face, as if it's any surprise to y'all to hear me say I cried. But I did, because of the way that one line, that one sentence puts Luffy's whole character into perspective. Not just that, we get Ace's whole character is put into perspective in this flashback as well. Not just with his bad habit of not backing down from a fight, but also the validation he gets from Luffy, following Luffy's admission to not wanting to be alone. Then we have Ace's talk to Luffy saying, "It would be hard if I wasn't here." And Luffy's like, "Yeah, of course." And then Ace asks, "Do you want me to be alive? You want me to be around?" And Luffy saying yes, validated something in Ace, who, because of his connection to Roger, has practically been told that nobody would ever want him. They would all want to kill him. And here's Luffy, this kid that he has been so mean to, has been trying to run away from, discard, push him away as much as he can. This kid comes in and says, "I want you to be around. I want you to be alive because I don't want to be alone, and my life is better when you're here." Can you see why this arc hurts me? Because it hurts more than we didn't get any grand fights. We didn't get any like huge big moments or anything like that. But it's this, the emotion with the characters, their development, the characterization of them, the things they say to one another have a bigger impact than the grand fights that we got in Marineford. Sure, they were epic and they were fantastic and awesome, but it's moments like these that make One Piece, in my opinion. It's moments like this when you get these characterizations for characters that you're attached to, that you love, and it just opens your eyes to so much more about them that make One Piece so special, and it makes One Piece so good because it takes its time to flesh out these characters. And this arc, that's why this arc hurt me more than Marineford. It's because of all of these moments, all of these emotional moments you get within it. Not just between Luffy and Ace or anything like that, but we get these moments between the crew and then Garp and Dadan, which I will eventually get to. We get all of these moments culminating and building and exploring these characters. And that's what hurts. The characters. I don't even know if I'm saying this correctly because I'm trying not to cry. But it's the characters. It's the characters that make One Piece so special. But yes, after Ace gets this validation from Luffy, Sabo, because they're now targets of these Blue Jam pirates, Sabo comes to live with Ace and Luffy, and we get this beautiful, beautiful montage of them just being kids, of them having fun, going hunting together, rummaging around the forest and in Great Terminal, and just being kids, having fun, living their lives. While we get this information that a celestial dragon is coming, my favorite people in all of One Piece, of course, to this kingdom. And that's when the corruption of this kingdom, the Goa kingdom, really kind of gets explored, because you have these separations within the kingdom of class. You have the Highland, I think they called it, where only the nobles live. And then you get this regular area where middle class citizens get to live, and then you have an outer ring where even lower class citizens are allowed to live, and then you have Great Terminal where the most unwanted people rummage around to live. It's the corruption and hierarchy that gets explored in the kingdoms of One Piece is very interesting, because it sets up a lot for the world government's corruption, of how much that corruption from the world government seeps down into the kingdoms, into the societies. Forgot that word. Into the societies around it. It's very fascinating to see how it all connects to one another, even though the Goa kingdom is very separate from the world government, but it's being visited by a noble from the world government. So, I mean, it's all connected. It is very interesting, but very angering at the same time, because most of these nobles, I think, like, Vivi and Sabo, like, Alabasta and then Sabo are, like, the sole exceptions that I've seen to nobles or kingdoms that are good so far, unless I'm forgetting one. But besides the corruption and the hierarchy in the kingdom, as Ace, Luffy, and Sabo are going through town because they wanted to eat good food and then skipped out on paying, Sabo gets recognized by somebody, and that is when he reveals to Ace and Luffy that he is a runaway noble, that, again, the corruption, that his parents only wanted him to get an education, to marry a princess. If he couldn't do that, he was practically worthless. And it was such a stifling life that he hated so much that he ran away. And after Sabo explains that, they all take the cups, the sake cups, to have an oath, and at that moment they become brothers. Officially they are brothers. And I love that moment. It is so sweet. And then, of course, we get this beautiful, beautiful montage. And again, I loved how the anime handled it. But in the manga, we get this beautiful montage of them being brothers. They're fighting in the forest, playing around, getting their own food, rummaging for things. They are just having a great time until Sabo gets captured by Blue Jam on the request of his father. And Sabo is forced to go back to his parents in order to save Ace and Luffy. Sabo is forced to lie to the police about Ace and Luffy, but he can't, and his father ends up bribing the police officers as Sabo gets hit to the ground for not doing what his father said. And then Ace and Luffy get recruited by Blue Jam for a job because Blue Jam is in cahoots with the Goa Kingdom to set the entire Great Terminal on fire. But Sabo gets back to his house and figure out that his parents adopted another child, another son, Stelly, just in case Sabo didn't work out. He was a backup in case Sabo failed, which is just so disgusting and horrible. Sabo figures out, because Stelly is awful and tries to brag about it, Sabo finds out that the fire is going to happen, and he instantly starts to worry about Ace and Luffy, and realizes that everybody in town is acting completely normal because they don't care. They're like, good, all the trash in this city, in this kingdom, is finally gonna burn. Good. That's when the reality of Sabo's heritage, of what being a noble in that sense is, just fully hits him, and he's so repulsed by it that he cannot stay. He knows he cannot stay, and he even says that he feels like he's in a cage, that he doesn't really know what freedom is, and it's why he wants freedom so badly. But yes, Ace and Luffy help set everything up for the fire unknowingly, and when they figure it out, they are captured and tied up so they don't interfere and tell anybody about the fire. So the fire starts, and it's just pure chaos of people trying to run away, trying to gather what they can, their family, kids, and try to escape this fire. And Sabo, worried for his brothers, tries to escape and warn them in some sort of way, gets tossed to the side pretty much by some adults who are keeping people out of the way so that the fire runs smoothly. And then Sabo meets Dragon. I'm sorry. Dragon, sir? Hello? Your son is over there. But yes, Sabo meets Dragon, and Sabo basically says, like, I'm ashamed of being born a noble. I'm ashamed of what I was born as. And it shocks Dragon, being like, they've made a child say this now. And Dragon gives us a little bombshell of information saying that he was born in this kingdom as well, which makes sense because Luffy's here, but it's got me thinking about a few things. But yes, Dragon was born in the Goa Kingdom, and that's why he pays special attention to it, like Eva points out when he's like, oh, I didn't think you'd even know about a town like this, and Dragon's like, of course I do. He makes up it's kind of an excuse, kind of the truth, kind of saying, well, this kingdom is a blueprint for the rest of the world. If we can't save this place where the unwanted are seen as trash and thrown out, we're not going to be able to save the rest of the world. In a sense, yes, he is saying the truth and kind of the mission of what the revolutionaries are about, but at the same time, he is paying special attention to it because this is the kingdom he was born in, and it's where his son is at. Though we don't get any interaction with Luffy and Dragon, which is fine. I'm wondering if Dragon even knew Luffy was there, like in that vicinity of the fire, or if he still thought Luffy was maybe in Windmill Village. I'm not sure. But it would have been really nice to see them interact. You know, a little father-son bonding moment would have been nice. But then Blue Jam realizes he was set up by the king, which, duh, the king wasn't gonna let them out. He gets angry. Ace and Luffy escape, and then Blue Jam confronts them. And then while this whole chaotic mess is happening, we get this horrible, horrible line from the king, who his daughter is looking out the window. An innocent child's mind easily corrupted in an instant when she asks, like, why are we burning them? Like, aren't they people too? And the king just easily corrupts this child's mind, being like, well, think about it. Like, if they really wanted to save themselves, they should have just been born nobles. And the child's like, oh, you're right. They should have just been born nobles. That's so stupid. Why weren't they born nobles? The manipulation of the adults on the children is horrible. The grooming is horrible. But that's how it happens. But Ace and Luffy are confronted by Blue Jam, and as they fight, Luffy gets a serious injury on his head, and they're about to kill him when Ace unleashes his Conqueror's Haki for the first time. He was able to use Conqueror's Haki when he was only 10 years old. No wonder Whitebeard would have wanted him to be the next king of the pirates. I mean, yeah. That really shows how strong and how much latent potential Ace had. Not just as a pirate, but just like as a powerful warrior in general. To be able to use Conqueror's Haki when he was 10 years old? Like, wow. But yes, Ace uses Haki to save Luffy. He doesn't realize what he did, but Blue Jam recognizes that something happened because everybody else collapsed around him. Right as Blue Jam's about to attack Ace, Dadan comes to the rescue, and Ace's bad habit rears its ugly head again when Ace refuses to run away from Blue Jam. And Dadan, I really like Dadan as a character. She is very much like a standoffish person when it comes to someone being their foster parent, but she also does a lot for them. She does a lot for the boys, and she cares about them way more than she will ever admit. She loves these boys, and this moment really speaks to it because she saw the fire happening and ran to them knowing that they could be in trouble. Risked her life to run to save these boys, and then when Ace refuses to leave, she stands beside him and says, I've got your back. I'll make sure he returns safe. I love her. She's very rough around the edges. Again, she's a bandit, she's a criminal, so she may not be like the best person in morality or best mentor, best figure to look up to, even best parent, but she loves these boys, and when push comes to shove, she's gonna be there for them. And I really like that. And she stays with Ace, and they fight Blue Jam, and they beat him. And Dragon ends up saving everybody in the Gray Terminal and invites them all on his ship to recruit them, saying, those who have the will to fight for freedom, come with me. Freedom is also... Freedom and dreams are like two of like the biggest themes in this story, and I love it. Luffy is back at Dadan's place, being patched up because he did get seriously injured, and because Ace and Dadan haven't returned for days, they think they're dead. Luffy thinks Ace is dead, and he is just devastating, begging to try to go after them, to find them. They won't allow it because of the cleanup taking place. They're trying to cover up the ashes of the Gray Terminal before the Celestial Dragon gets here to cover up their mess. And this is where it gets to the point where Sabo feels so trapped, and he desires freedom so much that he can't take it anymore, and he decides to run away. And how does he do this? He steals a boat to fly a flag on it and sails away right as the Celestial Dragon is coming in. But because Sabo was in a crossing path of the Celestial Dragon was like, how dare a peasant come my way, and blows up Sabo's ship. He blows up a child on a ship. If the corruption of the Celestial Dragons wasn't like plain enough to see from what we've already been shown of them thus far, it's even worse now. Like, I mean, it's almost like it can't get worse, and then it keeps getting worse. They're just horrible. Horrible, 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 horrible people. But as Sabo's ship gets blown up, Dogra sees it, and he has to be the one to report it back to Luffy. Before that can happen, Ace and Dadan come back. They are heavily injured. Dadan burned herself through the fire to provide protection to Ace so that they could get out. Again, she loves these boys. And this time, as Luffy is crying, I think it was kind of funny when Luffy was crying when Ace got back and he like went up to hug him and Ace hits him and he says, "Don't kill me off." It's really funny. A little bit of levity, I needed it. And Dan finally asks Ace why he didn't run. Why didn't you back down? And Dan gets this flashback when she's talking to Garp about Roger. How Roger would never back down from a fight, even if it was something he couldn't win. He never backed down because he wasn't going to allow anybody to get to his crew. He would rather the enemy focus on him than his crew, and that's one of the reasons Garp respected him so much. And Ace shows that he is very much like his father when he says, I have to pull it up. And Ace says, "I feel like if I run away, I'll lose something I could never get back. And this time, Luffy was behind me." Which, again, makes Ace's decision in Marineford make so much sense for his character. Like, as much as we wanted him to run, we were like, what? Like, this is obvious bait. Like, obvious bait. It wasn't just because Akainu was insulting Whitebeard. It was because his little brother was already past his limits and his little brother was behind him. And as soon as Akainu set his sights on Luffy, Ace was not gonna back away. He was not gonna run. He was gonna do whatever he could to save his little brother, because his little brother will stay behind him while he takes it. Not only does this show that Ace and Roger were very similar, but it just really shows how much Ace truly loved Luffy. What he would do for Luffy. And another thing about Ace's bad habit that I actually like that Blue Jam said something about it, because these words kind of ring true, not just for Ace, but to Luffy as well, in a sense. When he says, "Your overconfidence will be your undoing. Only two types survive on the battlefield, the strong and the cowardly. The brave always die first. That's how it's always been." And we see how that played out in Marineford. Ace wouldn't run. He wasn't a coward. Whitebeard wouldn't run. He wasn't a coward. Whitebeard, though he was extremely strong, he was a very brave person. To separate himself, he does the same thing Ace does. He puts everyone behind him to face his enemies head on and keep everyone else behind him. Ace, in a very similar way, will put himself in front and those he loves behind him. Luffy, in a very similar way, he probably learned this from Ace when he was little, will put himself in front of his crew to keep his crew behind him. Those words, though they came from a character who appeared and died within the same arc, they ring very true for a lot of our characters, and that's what makes people worry about these characters. They were worried about Ace, they were worried about Whitebeard, and people worry about Luffy, especially his own crew. They worry about Luffy all the time. But then Dogra gets back and has to share the news about what happened to Sabo, where he saw Sabo, or his ship, blow up. And Ace, of course, instantly gets angry. He's got some anger issues. Ace instantly gets angry. Luffy is crying. And Ace wants to go destroy. He wants to go kill whoever killed Sabo. He wants his revenge, and he wants it now. And Dan stops him. She slams him to the ground, and the words she says to Ace, she says, it's this nation that killed Sabo. It's this world. Do you think you can do anything about it? Like, she's finally taking a stand and talking some sense into Ace, talking some sense into this child who still doesn't have a scope about how cruel the world is around him. He has seen parts of it, he has seen snippets of it, but this cements the cruelty of the world to him, and she finally puts it in place for him. And she says, your father died and changed the entire era. Become as big a man as him before you even think about getting yourself killed. Hats off to Dadan, basically saying, like, Ace, at this point in time, you can do absolutely nothing. Like, you can do nothing about the situation, about who killed Sabo, about anything. You are not powerful enough. In order to make a change, you have to become someone like your father, like this man he hated most. He has to become someone of that stature in order to even try to make a difference in the era. And saying that to Ace finally makes something click in Ace's mind. Of course, it's after the anger finally subsides and he finally cools off. But her words have a huge impact on him. That's just my opinion. I have a feeling her words had a huge impact on him. Because after that, we get Sabo's letter that he had sent before he went out to sea. And Sabo talking about how he wanted freedom, how he would never find freedom if he remained where he was. When Sabo mentions, like, the roles of big brothers, like, who is the eldest? Who is the eldest brother? Was it me or was it you? And the commission he leaves to Ace, saying, Luffy is a crybaby, and he's not very strong right now, but he's our little brother. Take care of him. And it's that breaks Ace and has him cry. It's just, I want Cheetos. I'm hungry. I'm sorry. I need to go eat after this. Totally killed the entire mood. Wow. Okay. Yeah. After Ace cries, we get this conversation with Ace and Luffy. You can tell there's a little bit of time that had passed. And we get this conversation where Luffy, still very upset, says that he needs to be stronger. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots stronger. Because he says, I need to be stronger so there won't be anything I can't protect and nobody will ever have to go away again. Of course, it's this childish dream, this childish want that he doesn't ever want to lose anybody. He doesn't ever want anybody to leave him or go away. It really plays into that fear he has of loneliness, of being alone, and the idea that if he is not strong enough, he can't protect anybody. And we've seen that greatest fear of his come true, which is why the whole Summit Wars saga has been the most brutal for Luffy, because he's lost. And he's lost so much. And after Luffy says this to Ace, and he says, Ace, please don't die. Which again is like a childish fantasy, because it is a given fact of life. We live and we die. But for somebody whose greatest fear is loneliness, death or someone leaving is the greatest thing they can fear. It's not death for himself. Like, he's not afraid of dying. He's afraid of other people dying. He's afraid of those around him that he cares about dying. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with that revelation, because it hurts me a lot. And of course, Ace says that he's not gonna die, that he can't leave his little brother, his crybaby little brother behind. Which again, that's Ace in his own way still being a little childish, because again, that's not reality. And then we get Ace saying that whatever killed Sabo wasn't freedom. It was the opposite of freedom. And that Sabo died without being able to grasp it. I'm pretty sure Sabo is not dead. I am like 99.99% sure that Dragon snatched him somehow, because when we get like Dragon leaving and all of that, going back to Baltigo, yeah. When we get Dragon going back to Baltigo, it's kind of implied that he has someone else with him, who's like, oh my gosh, this is serious, we have to treat him quick. Him. Dragon's not injured. Who else could him be? I'm pretty sure Sabo's alive. So I'm not gonna grieve him just yet. But in Luffy's mind, he's lost both of his brothers. So it's not a fun thought. But we see this after the Celestial Dragon leaves, Great Terminal goes back to exactly the way it was before. People are still gathering there, they're still pushing trash out, and life returns to what it used to be before the fire, as if they didn't burn the entire place down. It really shows how corrupt everything is in this world. And it's sad. But we get more montages of Ace and Luffy, of course, as they are now fighting together and growing up together. We see conversations between them, they're training, and they think, you know, Sabo's still there, and we catch them like making these faces, realizing that they were talking to someone who's not there. And then we see them starting to grow up, they start to mature, they try to become independent of each other, until Luffy gets hit seriously while trying to take on this like giant bear or something by himself. And Ace, after seeing Luffy get injured, takes him to Dadan. That image of Luffy being wrapped up in bandages, being treated, and Ace in a corner covering himself up, crying, saying, I'm sorry, because he realizes that it's okay not to do everything on your own, and he's supposed to be there to help Luffy, to protect Luffy, and he let Luffy try to handle it on his own at that moment, and he knew better. That they're used to fighting with 3, and now it's just the 2 of them, and he was gonna let Luffy, his little brother, fight it by himself. It was short, but it's like a little maturing moment for Ace, and I liked it, but I didn't, because it made me sad. But we also see moments of Makimo coming up from Windmill Village to kind of teach them manners. Their interactions were super sweet. They're so cute. Their interactions, and we see them training. And then we get this time skip within the flashback of Ace turning 17, and he departs on his own journey. Luffy, now without his brother, has to train another 3 years before he sets sail, and he keeps up with how Ace is doing through the newspapers, and then 3 years later, when he's 17, it is time for him to depart. And I do love, I almost skipped this, but I'm not going to. I do love when Ace left that Dadan didn't go to see him off, and she's like, oh, I don't care, he only caused me trouble. And then as soon as she realizes that Ace's last words to her were thank you for everything, she starts crying. She's like, that rat, why would he say that? So cute. And then Luffy, when he goes off to leave, he actually goes to Dadan and says, hey, you know, I've always hated bandits. I've told you all my life I hate bandits, but you guys are okay, I like y'all. And then she starts crying at his words to her. It was so cute, and I love Dadan because she acts really tough, but she does love these boys, and that really proves it. And we see Luffy depart, saying that he's gonna be king of the pirates, and that transitions back to the present time in a very harsh and cruel reality where he's saying king of the pirates. There's no way I could be king of the pirates, and he screams, I'm so weak. That's not how I wanted to be brought back to the present. Before we get back to Luffy, we get this confrontation between Garp and Dadan, where Garp came back to Windmill Village and kind of put that village under his protection, I think for a lot of reasons, partially because I think that was his way of trying to make it up to everyone that he had failed, kind of like protecting what he has left, in a sense. And then we get this confrontation with Dadan, where she just starts wailing on him. She is punching him. He's letting it happen. He is fully letting her do this. He's not fighting back. He is taking all of this on himself as a type of punishment, and he's not letting anybody interfere. And she's laying into him, saying, why did you let this happen? You were right there. Why didn't you save him? And Garp can't answer. He can't answer her. Garp is a character that's made me cry before, and I still cry now. This moment really, I feel like he didn't know what to say at this moment, because again, he's just in a horrible position. When Makino comes and interferes and stops Dadan, even though she has all of these sweet memories with the boys too, and she's suffering and trying to say, like, look, he's suffering a lot, like he's suffering the most right now. And I love Dadan for this, because she was like, no, he's not the one suffering the most. Not saying that she is, or not saying that he's not suffering, saying the one who's suffering the most is Luffy. And she screams, Luffy, don't give up. I love that. And we get Ace and Whitebeard's funeral. Shanks has given them a beautiful resting ground. Marco thanks him for it. And as Shanks is leaving, he says these words, kind of in his mind, but to Luffy, that he knew Luffy was going to be in a lot of pain. But he says, you grow up and become a man by experiencing victory and defeat, by doing difficult things and shedding tears. It's all right to cry, just overcome it. Basically repeating the idea that all of them are having, just don't give up. Do not give in, do not give up. Work through it, overcome it. And then we get back to Luffy and JIMBEI, where Luffy is beating himself up so much to the point where he's basically killing himself. And this hurts because in Marineford, he said that if he can't save Ace, he wanted to die. He would rather die. And now, here he is in post-war, unable to save Ace, in serious condition. And what is he trying to do? He knows he's not okay physically, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care. And JIMBEI even says that, look, like, you're gonna kill yourself if you keep this up. And Luffy says, it's my body. I'll do what I want with it. Which is horrible to say. It's horrible. And JIMBEI tries to make the point. He said, that's what Ace thought. That's why Ace saved you. It was his body. So why would you be concerned with what he's doing? And that angers Luffy. That gets to him really quickly. I love and hate this part because it really shows that Luffy's biggest fear of loneliness, of losing people, the devastation of losing his big brother, overwhelms him to a point where he can't see any point of living. At this point, he's so drenched in darkness that he can't see anything other than grief, than despair. At this point, death is all that is waiting for him. And JIMBEI recognizes this and knows that Luffy's not gonna stop. On his own, Luffy's not gonna stop. If the only time Luffy would stop at this point is if he was dead. And JIMBEI, recognizing this, challenges Luffy because he knows if Luffy can direct his rage somewhere other than himself, he's gonna stop hurting himself. And JIMBEI knows that he can take Luffy down to calm him down and stop him if Luffy will turn his attention to him. And JIMBEI does exactly that. He lets Luffy attack him, and he quite literally puts Luffy down. He stops him in his tracks, gets him on the ground. And I think it's funny that Luffy so determinedly like trying to do anything he can. He bites Jinbei. That was like the one part of levity that I desperately needed. He bites Jinbei and Jinbei's like, ow. Like, he thought just slamming him into the ground was enough, but no, Luffy comes back and bites him and he's like, you little brat. Like, quit it. Enough is enough. But as Jinbei is subduing Luffy, he remembers Ace's conversation with him while they were in Impel Down, where Ace says, when Ace is talking about how he ran into Luffy in Alabasta, and he was like, I took one look at him and I wasn't concerned. Do you know why? And that's when Jinbei uses that conversation to his advantage to bring Luffy from the depths of despair. Ace says that he had people around him. When Ace says that Luffy had people around him, he had people around him that he could trust, that loved and cared about him. And when Ace saw that, he knew he didn't have to worry. He wasn't the Luffy that only had to depend on him anymore. He had his crew with him. And Jinbei uses that to bring Luffy back. When he says, he does that and more. His speech to Luffy was so crucial and so needed. And he says, are you blind to everything now? Where's your confidence that you can overcome anything? What happened to that strength you never doubted? You've met countless ruthless enemies who can easily crush you in what you believe in. And you lost your brother who was your guide on these seas. A giant wall stands between your eyes and the world. You can't see the way forward right now. Regret and guilt are consuming you. It may be painful for you now, Luffy, but fight it. Don't dwell on what you've lost. What's gone is gone forever. Try to remember what you still have. As soon as Jinbei says this to Luffy, it's like a light bulb moment for Luffy. The darkness that he was surrounded by kind of seems to slowly sift away, to where he can see some semblance of light, some semblance of hope that he can cling to make him want to live. And he starts counting on his fingers. And then he starts crying and he says, I still have my crew. I still have my friends. They are apart right now, but he still has them. I think that this was Luffy's I want to live moment. Like Robin in Enies lobby, this moment for Luffy was his I want to live. And Jinbei was the one to bring that out of him. Jinbei was the one to bring Luffy's will to live back to him. And after that, Jinbei realizes that it's done. He can sit down by Luffy and let it be, because Luffy's done. He's no longer trying to hurt himself, because he regained a purpose. He regained his reason to live. And then Luffy, crying, screams out, I want to see them. Watching this hurt, because the voice actress for Luffy, I watch in the sub. I watch the Japanese dubbed version, so I watch English subbed. The voice actress for Luffy does a phenomenal job of ripping my heart out. Hearing Luffy scream, I want to see them, had me full on sobbing. Like, sobbing. I was crying so hard at that point, because when he says, I want to see them, it just solidified that Luffy was still there. He was broken almost completely, but Jinbei was able to grab onto him before he completely let go, and Jinbei brought him back. I have been struggling through this whole review. This whole review has just been me trying my best not to cry, and it's not working. I appreciate Jinbei so much
not just as a character, but as he was the person that Luffy needed the most at that moment. He was the Luffy to Luffy. The one who will do anything to save his friends, the one who will say whatever is needed to be said, the one who will not give up on you even when you want them to. That's who JIMBEI was. JIMBEI was the Luffy to Luffy, like how Luffy was to all of his crewmates. That's who JIMBEI was to Luffy. And I love it so much. I love JIMBEI so much because he was able to not give up. He was able to hold in his grief in order to save Luffy, in order to be there for Luffy when he needed it the most. That's why I love JIMBEI so much. And that's why JIMBEI has to be on the crew. He has to join the crew whenever we go to Fishman Island. It has to happen. He has to be on the crew. I will not accept it otherwise. JIMBEI's able to get Luffy kind of back together. Not really. He just was able to calm Luffy down. And then we get Rayleigh popping out of the water. He just strolls up. Casual. First of all, my goodness, Rayleigh. Second of all, Rayleigh just strolls up and is like, hey, my ship sank, so I swam all the way here, which means he definitely doesn't have a devil fruit. But he's just so strong, he just casually swims across the ocean and beats up all the sea kings and everything as he goes. Alright? As if I needed another reason to love this man. Okay? And basically, I guess he just tells Law to leave. Law leaves with gives Rayleigh Luffy's hat. Luffy and JIMBEI come back. They start having a discussion, and as that's happening, Boa comes in, and they're all having a discussion. They know Rayleigh, because Rayleigh was one of the ones, along with Shaki, who helped them out when they needed it. Rayleigh explains how he knew that Luffy was there because of Shaki, and I love that JIMBEI is encouraging Luffy to eat. It's just another one of those moments that's like he's there helping him, just sitting by his side being like, no, like, you have to eat, you need to eat. To eat is to live. We do get some good levity with like Boa being there and her being like, JIMBEI, this food's for Luffy. It's quite funny. I love their interactions. It's really nice. But then Rayleigh, you know, offers this kind of ultimatum to Luffy because Luffy's wanting to get back to Sabo to be with his friends, and Rayleigh's like, are you sure you want to do that? Think about what happened the last time. And that image, as soon as Rayleigh says that with Luffy, it's just like, just saying that was like instant PTSD for him. You could just see him like in like a cold sweat almost just at the mention of it. And Rayleigh gives him this decision of what he can do. And as this is happening, all the crew is trying to make it back to Luffy. You have Nami trying to sneak her way off of the weather island. You have Zoro trying to fight his way off. Usopp trying to get out. Sanji arguing with Eva, which is really funny. The way that Eva doesn't believe Sanji is part of the crew because of the whole poster situation and him trying to convince Eva that he is. It's very funny. That was the bit of comedy I needed. Like, all of them are trying to get back to Luffy because they knew what happened, they saw what happened, and they're all desperate to get back to Luffy because the amount of guilt they feel must be overwhelming. They're like, he has been there for us through everything, and the moment he needed us, we weren't there. They're all trying to get back to Luffy until Chopper sees something in a newspaper that makes them all turn back. And Luffy's message that he left in the newspaper starts to circulate. And then we get some other very interesting tidbits of Dragon and Even talking together, of, you know, Dragon being okay with everybody knowing that Luffy is his son because Luffy's not a child anymore. And they want to talk about Kuma. And then we get Duval protecting the Sunny, which I thought was kind of cool because even after all this time, he's still loyal to Sanji and protecting the Sunny for them while they're away. And then we get
Vivi, like just the appearance of Vivi, I love her, so I was always happy to see her. She was trying to dissect the message that Luffy left as well. We get Crocodile just chilling with Mr. One, looking at the message as well, and then he's setting off for the New World. We get Buggy, who is reunited with his crew, and he gets a letter from the world government, or from the Marines, one of the two, I can't remember, which I'm pretty sure they're gonna make him a warlord, which I am very excited about. We get the information that Sengoku and Garp are both retiring, which again, I think that decision from Sengoku is very interesting. They're both retiring, really marking the end of the age, like their era is done. And Sengoku wants Aokiji to be the new fleet admiral. Very interesting. We get the Five Elders discussion about the warlords and the four emperors, as well as the Will of D. I'm not gonna talk about that right now because I've already dedicated several videos to it now. But that was really interesting. That was a very interesting conversation. And Smoker is going to the New World. Kobe has hockey. That's what was going on with him and Marineford. He's got hockey. The message that Luffy sent was he showed up to Marineford, which had to be really hard for him in a sense. He showed up to Marineford. He rang the bell 16 times, which basically is the declaration of a new era, the end of an old era and the beginning of a new one, which is really cool. And sends a message to his crew specifically. And the crew, upon getting that message, understand what he means. And a lot of other people see his message too, like Kid is in the New World, and we get the update on all of the others. What are they called? The supernovas. Yeah, we get all the other supernovas, what they're doing in the New World, how a lot of them are struggling, some of them are thriving. And we also get Law just biding his time. He is taking his time, not wanting to go to the sea, or not wanting to go to the New World at this moment. And then we get Blackbeard on this burning island with his crew. He's taken down Bonnie, has her in chains, and she's so mad. He's gonna turn her over to the Marines in exchange for a boat. I love this moment. It solidified Bonnie as one of my favorite supernovas when Blackbeard was being gross, trying to say like, oh, well, you can be my woman. And Bonnie just kicked the crap out of him, like, yes, yes, girl. I was so happy. That was a highlight for me, honestly. It's Akainu who is showing up to meet Blackbeard, and they realize that there's gonna be no trade or no deal, so Blackbeard and his crew leave. Bonnie gets confronted by Akainu, and this is what makes me think that Bonnie didn't mean like it was your fault towards Blackbeard, because Akainu says, and this might just be me overthinking, but Akainu says, a cold shiver ran through me when I heard you'd run away from the government, but it's all over now. And then Bonnie yells at him saying, you'll pay for this. That has me thinking, who is Bonnie? Who is Bonnie? We don't really know a lot about her, but that was very interesting. Then we get Doflamingo with talking with someone from the world government about how Moria disappeared, but he's still pretty much dead, and the world government is like, oh, well, you need to do your job right. And Doflamingo just basically says, you're not my boss. I'm doing this because there's benefit in it for me. The moment it isn't, he's gonna give up his title as a warlord, which means that he doesn't really care about the title or anything at all. He's just using it for his own benefit for something. I don't know what, but he's using it for something. But the crew all decides to stay in their specific locations and train up, because the message sent from Luffy was that it is no longer in 3 days, but 2 years. 2 years they will be apart to train before they get back together, which is gotta be hard on all of them for so many different reasons.
And I love the reactions from each of them. All of them have their own very special moments. There's a lot that really meant something. They all had little things that they said that I was like, that's wonderful. Like how Nami was genuinely crying, even though she, you know, pretended like it wasn't genuine at all. She was genuinely crying because she couldn't be there for Luffy. Sanji, while he's accepting the challenge from Eva about the whole cooking aspect of everything, saying, Luffy, don't give up. Like, we're coming back. Just don't give up. I loved that inner monologue from Sanji. Zoro begging Mihawk to train him, putting his pride aside in order to beg Mihawk, his rival, to train him in order to be stronger for Luffy. I love that moment. I love that moment. And how Mihawk recognizes that for someone of Zoro's caliber to put his pride aside means that he has found something or someone bigger than his own dream to think about. I love that. And then Brooke talking about Luffy, about how much light and joy Luffy brought him whenever they met, really hurt me. It really got me and made me cry. But I love how Brooke took that as inspiration to be stronger for Luffy so that he could be like a light to Luffy. And I love his, you know, his wonderful new single, Born to be Wild. Born to be Wild. That was really funny. Nice wordplay. I appreciated that. I love Usopp's moment as well when he says that, oh, I always thought Luffy could be king of the pirates on his own, but now I'm realizing like he can still lose. He needs our help. We need to be stronger for him. It really just solidifies what he was talking about in Thriller Bark, and I love that. And the arc ends with Luffy saying farewell to Jinbei, that they would meet again in 2 years in Fishman Island. And Luffy goes with Rayleigh to train, and they go on this island that has 48 seasons in a year, and Rayleigh finally teaches Luffy about hockey and says, in the next 2 years, I will train you in all of this. And Luffy takes off his hat, sets the hat down, and says, Straw Hat Luffy is taking a break. The pirate Luffy is taking a break, and that's how the arc ends. This arc was brutal. This arc was so heavy and so emotional, and it hit me very deeply in a lot of different ways. It really fleshes out Ace's character, Luffy's character. It made me love all of them more so than I already did, but it made my love for Jinbei just skyrocket. I love him so much. I have no limit to the appreciation I have for Jinbei for what he did to Luffy in this arc, what he did for Luffy in this arc. I really do love Jinbei though. His character has become really essential to the Straw Hats at this point, in my opinion. But I really loved this. I've made it to the time skip now. So now we'll see where we go from here. This arc was great. I really loved it. It really hurt me. But what are your thoughts on this arc? I know I kind of rushed some parts because this was really, really long. But if there's certain parts I kind of rushed through a little bit too much, let me know and we can chat about it down in the comments. Other than that, thank y'all so much for watching this review, and if you've made it this far, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it so much. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time, scholars. Bye!